Thanks, everyone. I feel a little bit like I'm at a wedding where only the bride is popular and the groom has no friends. So thank you for representing the groom side of the wedding. Um, a very warm welcome to this session on data in the age of misinformation. I'm Sasha Ramirez Hughes. I'm the Communications and Partnerships Manager at Paris 21. This is a joint session hosted by Paris 21, Open Data Watch, Development Gateway, and Full Fact. Um, so I think in some ways this title is a little bit of a misnomer. We're not really in the age of misinformation. Misinformation has probably been a part of human society since we started living together in villages. But there are probably some things that are a bit different, right? We are in a highly digital age where data is running as an undercurrent through absolutely everything that we do. It's becoming very easy to fake news and to create deep fakes with AI and to lobby armies of bots to put out stories that we like and that hurt our opponents in some ways. And so these things are new. And so I think the power of data to disrupt, can do good things, but it can also really disrupt societies and have a profoundly negative impact on what we do. So, it's an important topic, and I think it's one at Paris 21 that we've been grappling with for a number of years. And this is one of the reasons we started our own trust initiative, which is a program to give kind of micro loans to, or rather grants to small initiatives from startups and from local organizations in a number of countries, some of who are here, to do really innovative, fun stuff on the ground. Check out a very cool video that the Vanuatu National Statistical Office made that used really famous comedians from Vanuatu to talk about, how important data is in society. It's a really nice video that they did. Um, Anyways, you're not here to hear from me, especially because this is one of our most woman-dominated panels, which I think is amazing. And I think we have 5 women speakers in this panel, and Chris, which is really rare and we need more of, but I think it's a wonderful achievement. So it's great that you're with us. So we have 2 virtual scene settings, one from our co-host Deirdre at Open Data Watch, and one from Kate at Full Fact. Following that, we'll have a panel discussion. I'll introduce our panelists afterwards, and then we'll have some Q&A with the audience. So please think of some good questions for our panelists. So without further ado, please let me introduce Deirdre. Deirdre is a dear friend and a partner from Open Data Watch. She's a communications manager. She's also working with Paris 21 on lots of different things on the clearinghouse, and she wears many hats, and she's always very busy. But she's taken some time. God knows what hour of the night it is with her, where she is in the States right now, but she's with us today. So let me hand over to Deirdre. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right, let's try that again.
Hi,
All right,
Deirdre. Yes.
hopefully you can hear.
Yep.
I think my sound cut out, so I'm gonna keep talking and hope everyone can hear me in the room. Um, Sasha, just send me a WhatsApp if you can't hear me at all. But thanks for your patience with joining remotely. Thanks, Sasha, and thank you all for joining. Greetings from yesterday. Greetings from Tuesday evening in the U.S., where it's currently around 10 p.m. My name is Deirdre Pell, and I work with Paris 21 and Open Data Watch, as Sasha had mentioned. So we are gathered together for the UN World Data Forum this week to discuss better data for better lives. We see that slogan a lot around the conference center, but this session I think is different in particular. And we're asking a different question. And rather, it's what happens when bad data enters the room? What happens when the slogan is no longer better data for better lives, but bad data that hurts lives? And it sounds extreme, even like the start of a really bad horror movie. But the reality is that it is what's happening today in certain circumstances. Today, there are 2 major types of bad information or false information. The first is misinformation, which is inaccurate information, essentially getting the facts wrong. The other is disinformation or false information, which is deliberately intended to mislead or intentionally misleading and misstating facts. The spread of these two types of false information, misinformation and disinformation, is and has affected our ability to improve public health, address climate change, maintain stable democracies, and so much more. And by diving deeper into this topic, not only today, but in all of our areas of work, we can learn how and why we are likely to believe false information, how we can increase data literacy to combat such trends, how we can trust official data sources more, and how each of us within our own spheres can do the work to curb the spread of false information. And while I was preparing for this session, there's a lot that comes up, not on data and statistics, but a lot on psychology and a lot about what our brains can do. And our brains can do marvelous things, but they can also be very susceptible to falsehoods. And humans are generally bad at detecting fake information. Why exactly? A few factors that have come up included a lack of deliberation over the facts that we're viewing. So, individuals perhaps not taking the time and energy to deliberate over the accuracy of the data that they're exposed to. The second is repeated exposure. Research has shown individuals are more likely to deem a false statement true the more times they're exposed to it. And lastly, novelty. False information is often novel, more novel than perhaps the true news or the true facts, and it inspires a stronger sense of emotion in us, which might be more memorable. And the opponent of false information is a tough one. False information has the advantage of spreading fast and much further than true facts themselves. According to a study by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, fake news spread 10 times faster than legitimate news stories. And we can't blame the bots for this. These are humans that are sending around these stories. And the global range of theories and conspiracies related to COVID over the past years is really just one example of how fast information can spread. So we're at a time when knowing facts can truly save lives. But unfortunately, once misinformation and disinformation gets a foothold, it's really difficult to correct. So where do we turn? And luckily, we have a great panel ahead, which is where we'll be turning to discuss this topic. And so, on the producer side, governments, particularly national statistics offices, play a key role here in providing the detailed, transparent, official data that can crowd out false information. But there's another element, of course, which is the trust component. So governments can be providing all the accurate information they have, but they also need to be trusted. And open data is certainly one of those tools to be able to trace the numbers back to methodologies and sources to build that trust. And so, of course, looking forward to hearing from our panelist Ola from the Palestine Central Bureau of Statistics on the role of the official statistics community, and how they contribute to this subject. And so on the user side, I think we as consumers need to learn data literacy skills. We need to learn to discern, as some of the panelists also like to call it, and you'll hear from IREX and also fact checkers like Full Fact, who are spending their working lives and energy to fight false information. And lastly, we'll hear about the topic from donors like the Hewlett Foundation, who are strengthening capacity of our data ecosystem by promoting evidence-based policy, as well as experts from the internet who can shed light onto the role of the digital world in this as well. So it's a lot to tackle in 60 minutes. Surely we'll only scratch the surface, but really looking forward to the discussion that'll hopefully put us on a path to partnership for the future. So back to you all in Hangzhou, and thanks so much.
Thanks very much, Deirdre. I really like the fact that you introduced psychology and and also this element of hope, because of course this is why we're here. As nefarious as fake news is, we're here to talk about solutions and to learn from our panelists about the interesting things that are being done. So let me introduce Kate. Kate is from Full Fact. Full Fact is a new breed of kind of journalists that are playing this really critical role in society of looking at the fake news that's out there, looking at the facts that are put out, dispelling the myths, and giving some credence to those that can be trusted. So I think they have a really, really important role to play. Kate will talk to us about global literacy, fact-checking partnerships. Kate, we're with you. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to be speaking to you all from the early hours in Johannesburg, South Africa. Thank you for the introduction, Sasha. I'm a senior product manager at FullFact, which is the United Kingdom's leading fact-checking and campaigning organization. As Deirdre has introduced and started the discussion on, disinformation is widely acknowledged as a threat to societies around the world. The 24-hour news cycle, the continued growth of social media platforms has made it easier than ever to spread disinformation quickly and to a large audience. This, as we all know, can have serious consequences, from causing public panic to influencing the outcomes of elections, harming health outcomes, and fostering distrust in democracy. Fact-checking is based on a simple idea: accurate information matters. Every day across the world, people make decisions, big and small. They decide where to live, which medicine to take, and who to vote for. To do this, they rely on publicly available information and often official statistics. I would like to suggest 2 ways that the communities represented in this session can work together to address these problems. First, we need to strengthen data literacy globally. The common focus of this objective is often the general public. We have seen campaigns of varying success working on training the public to read, understand, and communicate data accurately. There are regular calls for journalists, activists, researchers, communication professionals, and governments to locate, access, and understand data concepts and terminology, interpret and analyze data, and communicate these insights and findings clearly and accurately to the public. But these efforts will not be successful if the producers of national statistics do not meet the efforts halfway. In 2019, a coalition of fact-checking organizations led by FullFact was chosen from more than 2,600 nonprofit organizations as a winner of the Global AI Impact Challenge. Part of that project focused on identifying how national statistics organizations could improve the way that they publish their data to make it easier for users, including fact checkers, to use and access the data. 4 important points arose from interviews from fact checkers, statisticians, and technologists. First, national statistical offices need to communicate better about the data that they produce. This needs to include the topics that they publish statistics on, where they can be found, and who in the organization can help users find and understand the data. Second, national statistical data has to be easy to find. Data sets should be available outside of PDF reports. Data sets should have high quality metadata that describes them well, and NSO websites need to have high quality search functions so users can explore the available data. Third, data should be published in formats that best suits users' needs, and the needs are varied. Often data is published in one format, whether it be a PDF, an image, or a spreadsheet. Multiple formats will meet wider user needs. Data tables should also be published in CSVs or spreadsheet files, and NSOs that produce APIs allow users to create programs like FullFact, which fetch needed data. Lastly, NSOs should be open to contact and discussion about the data that they publish. Data literacy is a vital part of improving the use of national statistics, but as I've highlighted here, it can only succeed when national statistical organizations clearly communicate about the data they publish, make it easy to find, provide multiple user-friendly formats, and are open to engagement. All of these will aid with data literacy, but importantly, they also increase trust in our NSOs and the data they produce. I'd like to conclude on the last point, which is that fact checkers and national statistical organizations are natural allies in the fight against false information and the misuse of official statistics. And I'd like to just provide one example. FullFact has produced technology using AI that helps users, including NSOs and regulators, spot when official statistics are misused or misrepresented and when those claims are repeated. In November 21, FullFact fact-checked then United Kingdom Prime Minister Boris Johnson when he claimed there were more people in work in November 21 than there were before the pandemic, that being that the numbers had rebounded. We found this was misleading, if not false, because although payroll employment had recovered, the total number of people in work, including the self-employed, had not. We used this data and our findings to write to the UK's Office for Statistic Regulation to highlight this misuse of the data. And we were also able to provide more instances of other government officials sharing this claim. As a result of this and other input, Ed Humperson, the Director General for Regulation at the Office for Statistics Regulation, wrote to Downing Street to confirm that the statement was incorrect. And as of March this year, our tools at FullFact AI have identified 27 repeats of this claim, phrased in different ways by different people that might otherwise have gone undetected. These tools are available to fact checkers, statistical organizations, and regulators around the world. Today, I hope we can explore how fact checkers like FullFact and statistics producers can work together to fight the misuse of official statistics, misinformation, and strengthen each other's work. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kate. Well, as an organization who fact checks the former Prime Minister of the UK's comments, you must have your work cut out for you. So, but I won't go further into that. No, but thanks. I think many of the things you brought up are themes that we've heard throughout this conference. You know, breaking down silos between NSOs, government, private sector, civil society, really crucial. Building trust, strengthening communications. Those are really, really vital aspects. Also, you know, meeting user needs. I mean, if we're producing data, what's it for? It has to be resonant with the people that are actually using it, and in a very rapidly shifting technological landscape and also information landscape, this is a critical issue. So, without further ado, let me introduce our distinguished panel. Sitting immediately to my left is Ola Awad. Ola is the leader, the president of the Palestine Central Bureau of Statistics. Under Ola's leadership, you know, PCBS has become really one of the leading global advocates on gender data, on innovation, on data for the SDGs. So we're delighted to have Ola with us today. Next is Nenna. Let me see if you know where Nenna's from. Let me test you to see if you've been listening. Where is she from? The internet, right? Yeah. And who better than somebody from the internet to talk us through some of the important issues around misinformation in the digital age. And finally, last, Chris Maloney. Chris is from Hewlett. We wish all of our financing partners, all foundations, were a bit more like Hewlett, because Hewlett puts data at the center. They put evidence at the center of what they do, and that's really critical. And I think also, you know, more importantly, for an organization like us, or as importantly, you know, they're not just a funder. They're really a partner. They're a thought leader, and they work very closely with their grantees to actually exchange some of Hewlett's knowledge and best practices, and that's really critical for us. Finally, we have Lara Azar. She's a program officer from the International Research and Exchanges Board, IREX. IREX is a global training organization. I think they worked with around 500 partners in over 100 countries last year. So IREX really, truly has a global impact. So let's dive right in. I think, Ola, I'm starting with you. Let's talk a little bit about PCBS. You know, what tactics, how do you work with different stakeholders, such as media, to foster trust in official statistics, and how does open data play a role in these efforts?
Thank you so much. I'm really so delighted to be here and to talk about really this important issue. And I want to start with what has been actually presented in the opening ceremony, and with your quote, Chris, when you talk about the data is a form of power. And this can't be done if we all, as within the data ecosystem, we have really a kind of a different mindset, how we can really work together, how we can communicate together, how we can engage all together. And I think that's really the most important thing, how engaging and communicating. And from our perspective as National Statistical Office, we have a communication strategy where we often work with each target group or each segment, whether it's media, academics, policymakers, researchers, and also kids in schools, children, um, also in different target groups, women, people with disability. So all of them, we have actually a tailored working theme with them. And the most important thing in that part, how we are able to engage, because I mean, as NSOs and as a chief statistician, our role is not just to produce data. The most important thing, how to have this data to be a power, and the only way is to have this kind of engagement. So when we talk about, for example, media, because you just brought it on board, so we develop, for example, I will give so many examples in that perspective. We have what we call a statistical calendar, where we put all the international and national events statistically. For example, if we say Labor Day is coming May 1st, so we have such a huge work with the media and journalists on May 1st, talking about labor, focusing on women in labor, focusing on youth unemployment, focusing on all aspects. And this is how we really get engaged. This is on one part, which is, for example, the dissemination or data literacy. But what I'm saying, it's not only when we talk, because our session is talking about misinformation and how you bring trust. To bring trust, you have to get all your stakeholders and partners related to the topic and get engaged from the whole process, from the data production, data processing, until data dissemination. And for us, this is the way that we succeeded with all our target groups, to get their trust. And now, I mean, our protection is our public, actually, when we have sometimes really attacks from so many different players, the one who actually protect the data and fight for the trust of the data is the public and not us. But what we did is we really engaged a lot in all our process, from the data production and the data processing, because I mean, when you get a number, it's not an easy process to get it. But if you engage your partners and stakeholders in this process, they know exactly the whole process that you went through, and they are part of it. So they really play this major role, and they can be part of the whole mechanism. So for us, it's our successful experience is how we get engaged and communicate with every single target group, and we give it really a care. The other issue is how to get more development with technology, because I mean, it does help us a lot. So this is so much important. I mean, that we keep up the development, and this will also help us within also the process and within our engagement. And even, for example, now being open for our data, for our raw data, having the data in an interactive way. And this also can't happen if you're not also engaged and you don't know, and you know actually the needs of your users. And this is how also we do a kind of user satisfaction survey, a user satisfaction survey that is done every 2 years, where we often ask our stakeholders and partners on the needs that they are looking for on assessing what we are doing, and and checking how things are going. And this is the dynamic dialogue all the time with our users, with our stakeholders, and with our partners. This is how you can bring trust to data, and this is how you can avoid as much as possible the misinformation and the disinformation.
Thank you, Ola.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Ola. I love that idea of the public being your champion, your defender. I think that must, in some ways, be the highest aspiration of a statistical organization, and I think it's really a testament to the work that PCBS has been doing that it's been able to achieve that. And I know some of the work that we've done with you, on bringing media journalists actually into PCBS and teaching them about actually how data is produced and how it's used is critical. But I think I want to come back later to a point about data literacy, because to get the public on side, you have to have some sort of measure. It's not exactly the same, but some sort of measure of data literacy as well in society. So that's an important issue. So we'll come back to that. Thank you. So Nenna, let me talk to you a little bit. Let's talk about you've been a long-standing defender of digital rights, universal access to the internet. From your perspective, how can we build trust in communities in the digital space to curb misinformation and fake news?
Ni hao. Thank you so very much, Ola. I wrote that one down, that the public would fight for it. That's a beautiful thing to tweet. Once I leave here, I'm going to tweet it. How many of us enjoy any kind of sports? Basketball? Tennis? Soccer? Okay. I'm a soccer fan. I'll be speaking on 3 points. The first, I'm going to give you a soccer illustration. I'm going to talk about 3 communities, and I'm going to talk about 5 principles for building trust. What is this? VAR. Everybody knows that now. I spent 3 weeks in Qatar for the World Cup. And Argentina, anyone from Argentina? Anyone from Morocco? Anyway, so here is the thing. When a goal is scored, everywhere in the world, there is jubilation or there is crying. That data is verified until, oh my God, what is he doing? The referee will go and verify, and he will say this, woohoo, it's a goal, right? That's the illustration about data. Our lives depend on it. So that's the illustration. Who are the communities? There is a policy-making community, those who set rules, norms, laws, regulations. There is a code-making community, those who build platforms, technology, design, products. And then there's a content-making community, those who put out data, who produce data, who share them along. 3 communities, I'll take those again. There is a lawmaking or policy-making, whatever you call it. There is a code, technology, platform-making community. And there's a content-making community. I'm not talking about users. Okay. Who from here primarily think that they are from the policy lawmaking stakeholder group? Okay. Who is from the technology, code, and design product making community? Who is from the content production community? Okay. Thank you very much. So we're done with that. Now, there are no users, because there is no user community, because at every point in time, even the one who is a content producer may become a regulator in some things. And the one who is a platform, algorithm, a code producer may become a content maker at a point. So it is very important that you do not camp in one camp. Okay, that's not correct English. That you don't put all your 100% in one camp. It is really very important for the next phase of what I'm going to say. The next phase is, how do we build trust between the community that is making laws and norms, the community that is building platforms, algorithms, and products and designs, and the community that is building content and sharing it. The first is that we need clear rules and norms. If they are not clear, if we don't know the rules of the game, we are going to have problems in trust. So, clear rules and norms. That's number one. Number two is transparency and openness. Ola said it. Like when a goal is scored, LeBron James was giving it hard the other day. When a basket is done, everybody knows it's done. It's transparent. It flashes there. You know your score. Everybody agrees with it, whether you are losing or winning, but the data is there. So we need to be transparent and open about how we go into our business. And those are the basic principles with which we can fight misinformation. Ola talked about engagement. I want to add another word, multi-stakeholder engagement. Because you cannot say, I'm government. We've seen governments come and go. One of these days, you may become civil society. You can go from international community to the donor community or philanthropy community and back to civil society. We keep moving. So it's really very important that we are open to other communities, whether we are making rules or not. My fourth point is compliance and responsibility. There is no point making rules when there will be nobody to obey them. So if we agree on a set of norms, principles, guidelines, rules, whatever you want to call them, then let's all comply to them and let's be responsible. We talked about monitoring and evaluation. We talked about regular assessment of those rules. In the digital world, 5 years is a generation. So our problem, madam, with the statistical community is that okay, I'm trying to, you're my friend, so I don't want to offend you. you use methods that don't change very easily. True. And when you run a census, it may take 1 year for the results to come out. So the population that they're giving you of Hangzhou today is with the census that was done maybe 2-3 years ago. And in Africa, where the population is growing, when you have the census of 2020 for the population of 2023, anyway. So these are the things we have to be open to this kind of conversations. The first one was clear rules. The second was openness and transparency. The third was multi-stakeholder engagement. The fourth is compliance and responsibility of all partners. And the last, I haven't heard, is security and rule of law. Deirdre tried to explain to us the difference between misinformation and disinformation. These are very important. Some things we say, oh, it's not really harmful. But I also want to add to disinformation and misinformation political propaganda. I think we've all seen that recently, especially around election time. It is not just misinforming people, and she talked about bad data that hurts lives, but we are looking at blown out civil war. We're looking at people's lives, not just hurting, but actually killing people. So misinformation is something dangerous. And that is why for soccer fans, we go by fair play. Misinformation is so dangerous that if we don't put the rules down, if we are not transparent, if we are not engaged responsibly, if we do not comply to the rules of the game, if security is not priority, we will all lose. But when we do this, then whether we lose in the game or win in the game, we will stand up for the right results. And that is why, even if I'm not happy as an African, I will still respect the fact that Argentina is the champion of soccer. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Nena. Both an eloquent defense of the need to fight fake news and a good description of the last World Cup. But I mean, I want to pick. I mean, there's so much in what you said that I want to talk about. But let's go back to VAR. I mean, that was the first thing that you mentioned. So anyone who isn't 100% aware, VAR, video assisted referee, right? I mean, this is the idea that when somebody scores a goal or does something, the traditional way of doing it is that you have somebody standing there and they say, well, I think this was a goal or not, right? A few years ago, I'm not sure how many, the video screens were introduced, cameras flying around. It can tell you exactly what really happened. This was really controversial. I mean, this is not something that people accepted. And I think what this really speaks to is the fact that the rules by which we identify and fight misinformation are changing, and especially as you talked about, the fluidity of our roles, the fluidity of the technology of all these aspects. We also have to together come up with ways that we can actually work together to fight these things and define together the rules. So maybe later, if we have time, we can come back to this issue of how the kind of factors that we can put into play by which we can together identify those rules in a shifting landscape. Very good. So, Chris, I will come to you in a few minutes, I promise, but I want to go first to Lara. IREX has been doing some really interesting work around their Learn to Discern programs. This really works to build resilience, to fight misinformation, manipulative information, and especially empowering those who engage with the media. We've heard a lot from the data producer side and also from our colleagues who talk about the whole ecosystem and all the role of the actors within it. So from IREX's side, as the kind of user or interpreter of the data, what can data producers do, like NSOs, and we've heard a couple of examples, to really support your work and how you can work closer together? Lara, over to you.
Hi, thanks. It's great to be here. First I'd start with just an understanding of the framework that on the data interpreter side, as a consumer of information, it's not just going to be a scale or two that will be a quick fix. Being able to read and understand statistics, being able to fact check on an individual or on a journalist level, it's important, but there is so much information out there. We're constantly being bombarded with information that as our previous speakers have mentioned, it's very easy to be susceptible to manipulative information, even if you are a media literacy practitioner, for example. Because as is mentioned, our natural cognitive and emotional biases, aid in making us susceptible to manipulative information, we kind of zoom out and talk about resilience, as you mentioned. And so rather than immediately focusing on being able to fact check your information or use video verification or immediately understand a graph, we start with individual awareness and abilities, and being able to recognize and understand our emotional and cognitive biases and how are they at play when we interact with manipulative information, or when we interact in the information environment, understanding our knowledge of our information space and the infrastructure, like our social media infrastructure, the fact that we are not so much consumers, but rather data points and things like that, understanding the addictive properties of digital devices. And then from there, we can talk about digital safety and skills and tools like video verification and being able and very specific data literacy tools. And from there, we also bring in pro-social behaviors like digital citizenship. And now that we have these skills, how do we share them with others, and how do we, be a good citizen in the crazy world that is the internet? So I just wanted to start with I think it's important to start with understanding this kind of resilience framework that if the ecosystem, if our information space is this vibrant, chaotic ecosystem, we have the skills that people need go well are equally diverse and equally complex, I would say. And so obviously there's a lot to work within this framework. So we like to think of it as a system, and that is where NSOs come in. I think we like to look at the problem on 3 different levels. First, building individual resilience, and then community level resilience, and that's like working with leveraging local trust networks with local trust networks and working with community leaders. And then we have systems levels, and that can look like working with ministries of education to integrate media literacy and data literacy into our education systems. And I think NSOs can be really powerful in helping us work on these 3 different levels. I could say some of the things that have been said before that are obviously very important about openness and transparency and kind of tailored data, but I want to talk about it a bit from not that kind of stuff is important for consumers of information, but also for practitioners to help people who are consuming information. So on the individuals, on the individual level, we have a lot of information on trends and how and the impact of bad data literacy and how manipulative information spreads and how data is used. But I think it would be helpful to start getting baseline information on individuals' knowledge of the information ecosystem, their awareness of the problem, their habits, and that baseline would allow practitioners to better tailor their efforts going forward. And on the community level, many of our partners, our local partners in 24 countries of the world, we have a very tailored and localized approach, and we work with small media organizations. We work with women's organizations, and each of these organizations have very specific needs. And I think the points about openness and communication and open source data are important here so that these organizations can better tailor their work to support the communities that they're supporting. And then on the systems level, what I would recommend, and it's been said before, is to work with outside of the usual suspects and kind of form cross-sectoral collaborations. For example, in the education system, governmental data from the Ministry of Education in terms of what they might have on media literacy goals in the school system would be useful. But also, I think there's this kind of open approach to data could be a very valuable learning and jumping off point for network building and learning and sharing for practitioners. In many of our programs, we have several different communities of practice that share learning from implementation. But I think participation and engagement specifically from statistics offices would be crucial in continuing to build networks and creating, it would be essential to systems level change, because this is how we've been able to work with as many people as we have so far by connecting practitioners and connecting our learning and just consistently tailoring our efforts to support all of our participants and to help build resilience to manipulative information.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Lara. You know, working outside the usual suspects, fostering communication, I think these are all key themes that you brought up. I want to pick on one thing. You know, this aspect of resilience is I think really interesting, and it's something that personally I'm really interested in. You know, I've been really shocked lately to read about how much the world of education has changed since COVID. I mean, it's really dramatically different than it was before. This is a shift to remote learning. This is AI-powered learning. This is contextual learning. This is the rise of private schools and charter schools. And this really has a profound impact. And I mean, so you think what it's like today, think about 10 years from now, when you may be a young person having an entirely personalized AI-driven learning experience throughout your whole learning experience. And what happens if you're a vulnerable young person? What happens if that AI system is giving you biased information, misinformation, disinformation? Those things will be extremely difficult to overcome, and I think those aspects that you spoke about will be critical to overcoming those. So last but not least, Chris, let's talk about your experience from Hewlett. You know, I mean, as I mentioned, you have a very strong focus on evidence-informed policymaking. I know you have a lot of 6 a.m. phone calls with your many grantees in Africa and throughout the world, and that you spend a lot of time on the road speaking to them. So maybe you can walk us through your experience and talk a little bit about their challenges and opportunities in respect of this area. Thanks.
Sure. Well, thanks for that. So maybe just to sort of step back a little bit, you know, Hewlett originally moved into the data space in what we termed at the time data revolution. And it was really just, if we just get more data into the hands of policymakers, life will be so much better. And so that, I think, was extremely naive. And what we realized about 2 or 3 years ago in particular is, particularly in the case of Africa, the continent we care about most at Hewlett, is there's a huge battle right now, and I'm going to use that term, I'm not sure my colleagues would use that, but I would use it, on the question of data governance.
Yep.
And there's an amazing panel yesterday that had a very technical title, so you might not have thought it was that exciting, but I thought it was great, on cross-border data flows, where a speaker from business school down in Singapore talked about the 3 different kingdoms right now of data governance. One, which is the US, which is highly focused on maximizing data for the benefit of firms. Yeah. China, which is very much maximized on the benefit of the state and state security. And then Europe, which is really focused on the person and the human rights of data.
Yes.
In Africa, all 3 of those models are competing right now. And so from a Hewlett standpoint, what we're most interested in is really empowering African civil society groups, universities, and think tanks to shape what is the African response to data governance. And so that is really sort of the ingoing thesis that I have when I'm working with my grantees in this space and hearing what they're trying to do. Because I don't think it's the Wild West of the US. I don't think it's the other 2 models either. What does a balanced approach to data governance look like, where we can maximize the benefits of data while at the same time protecting the rights and privacy of the average person? What does that look like? And what does that look like in the African context that's fit for purpose? I do not have the answer to that sitting in a eucalyptus forest in Menlo Park, California, which is why I'm on the road all the time. But I love working with all of my grantees. So let me share 3 or 4 examples just to give you some color of what we're seeing and finding as this space is very new. So the first, and this kind of goes a little bit to what you're talking about, which is, how do you make people even care about this? Because it's data, it's kind of boring and dull, and I have to admit, coming from the US government into this, I was like, this seems like the most boring topic ever. But we have a really interesting partnership between Amnesty International Kenya and the Open Institute of Kenya, where they are effectively working together on a push-pull model, where Amnesty is leveraging its amazing social media campaign around why you, as Joe Kenya, should care about your data rights and privacy. One of my favorite, and I can never say it correctly in Swahili, but they basically had a hashtag that translates to hide your nakedness, and it had like 5 million hits in Kenya. And it was basically a way to get young people to be like, what's this about? And you click into it, and it was all about your data rights because of how much you're revealing of yourself online and day to day. But Open Institute, on the parallel side, is working closely with the Data Protection Commissioner's Office and a whole range of county governments in Kenya on basically building their capacity to understand what they need to be doing in Kenya to implement the data protection laws that are in Kenya right now. So you have this push and pull model that as Kenyan citizens engage more in the data space, they actually have government officials that can respond effectively with them. So it's a kind of interesting push and pull that we have going on. Another one which I find really interesting is really thinking through the pull-through of all of the momentum that's going on so that it's not sort of like people playing at the AU level, people playing at the national level, and people keep forgetting also about the local level. And so I have an interesting portfolio of grantees that are really looking at Uganda, of all countries, from a data governance standpoint, as a place to sort of have a holistic approach. So the AU, of course, released the AU data policy framework. It is now pushing that down to the national level so that country governments are translating that into their national context. I have Pulse Lab Kampala, which is leading this incredible multi-stakeholder umbrella group of government, civil society, other researchers to basically develop the national data strategy for Uganda. And then I have grantees that are doing that at the urban level in the 9 cities of Uganda, so that all that thread is being pulled through. And where I've now started to ruffle some feathers, but in a fun way, and that I'm allowed to do from my position of privilege in California, is really pulling in for the first time advocates in Uganda who may not necessarily fit in that nice sort of technical space. So if you're familiar with the Unwanted Witness, this is a group that I've been looking at right now that is doing some interesting work on not being afraid to push buttons, I guess, so that you're really starting to move the needle. It's not sort of the same old, same old. And then the last thing I would talk about, and this I think goes to sort of Netta, your point on how you think about communities, is this is all so new and all so wide, and there is just such differing levels of understanding and trust and the need for safe spaces. How do we think about how we can empower and create more of that? One reason why I think there's not a lot of colleagues from Africa here today is that for whatever reason, Smart Africa's flagship annual event is this week in Victoria Falls. It's the Transform Africa Summit. So like, it's quite interesting to sort of see all these parallel things going on in data. But one of the things that I'm very excited that's being launched there today is the relaunch of the African Data Leadership Initiative, or ADLI, which is a tripartite collaboration between the Digital Impact Alliance, UNECA, and Smart Africa, which effectively is going to do 2 things. It's going to provide a Chatham House space for 15 African countries, mid to senior level data policymakers to debate and engage with key African think tanks and CSOs and university departments and some global players as well on key issues in African data governance. And they have that space to do that and engage on some of these more sensitive topics, get that capacity built in a way that isn't so public or whatever that might look like. And it's just wonderful that we'll have that. And in parallel, they'll be doing a separate track for African parliamentarians in partnership with the African Parliamentarians Network on Internet Governance, or APNIG, which was launched at IGF and Addis last year. So being able to empower some of these networks and just to bring people together in this space, I think is really key, because that's really where the trust is going to be coming from. If you can provide well-curated spaces that are safe for these different communities to engage each other is key. I could go on, but I'll just stop there. But I just wanted to give a little bit of flavor of what I'm seeing, particularly lasered in onto the African context on this question.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Chris. No, I mean, I think, again, these are such critical themes, especially even for this event, something we I think, at least as long as I've been involved, we've always been trying to broaden the community that comes to these events and that speak at these events, and the perspectives also of local actors, grassroots organizations, and also improving coordination. As Chris said, there's some overlaps in the scheduling. This always happens in the data space because there's so many exciting things happening. But, I think that's definitely something where we as a community can do more and can strengthen our efforts. So much appreciated. And I'm going to shamelessly plug the next session actually after this one, which is actually looking at some experiences of parliamentarians, as Chris said. So we'll actually be in this room in about 20 minutes talking about Mongolia and Vanuatu's experiences actually in data literacy, data use from their perspective. So we're a little bit over time, but I do want to give some space to Q&A. But I'm going to do something, I'll come to you in a second, but I do want to do something a little bit radical and see if any of my panelists have any questions for other panelists that are here. Not to put you on the spot, but so many interesting things I think have been said. Nana, please go ahead.
It's not a question, but I just want to voice it out. It may be crazy, but while Chris was speaking, he kept speaking about what Hewlett is doing in Africa and what's happening in Africa. And I'm asking myself, is there an Africa-centric data issue that is not global? Are there some data issues that are just African instead of being global? That was what kept ringing into my head. Are there issues that Africa has in data that Asia does not have, that the EU does not have, that the US does not have? I don't know.
Thanks, Nana. Very, very important point. And I think, the universality of some of the issues that we face can be dealt with in one way, but also empowering organizations and actors to actually solve their problems themselves, I think is a really important role, especially of the international community. And I think that's why our panel looks like it does today, having a diversity of experiences here. So let me turn to the audience, if I may, and I think there are some mics that will be circulating around the room. So many questions. I think the gentleman in the front had his hand up first, and then the woman here. Could we get a mic up at the front, a microphone? Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Omar Saeed. I am CFO of a top-ranking agriculture university in Pakistan. And wonderful talk about the data, misleading data. And my question to the panelists is that what role the universities can play in collecting data, in manipulating data, in creating the real data, and finally to stop the misleading data to the people, to the industry, to the stakeholders. So what the academia and the universities can play a role in this context. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'm not sure, was that for a specific panelist, or should I just see who wants to answer that one? Ola, please go ahead.
Thank you. It's really important, and the role, I may say directly, is to use the data and also to engage in the data. Sometimes the problem that we see that our students in universities are not really have a kind of advocacy on the data and the use of data, and also on research, and bringing the theoretical part, or bridging the theoretical part to within the practice is so much important. And this is the practice where you can bring data on board, and how the university and for example, the NSO play a role. For example, in our case, we have, in addition to internships, all the data that we produce, all the raw data, often immediately goes to our local universities. They have actually a data center where we often send it directly. Any survey is completed, the raw data goes to them so they can actually use it in research. In addition to this, we have actually a joint program with the university where they come and actually have a kind of training, and there's a kind of mutual, courses that we often do, and they often come. But this kind of engagement is so important, not only with the students, also with the academics. Our academics are part of what we say advocacy team, where, for example, when we do our economic forecasting, we bring them so they can actually be part of the process. When we do a kind of survey, they are part of the process. So when we talk about inflation, for example, so when we say about a number, so they are really exactly part of the whole understanding on how the number came, so they can be really part of the advocacy and also presented in an academic way for the students to be well aware. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ola. Thank you. Nana, please.
Just one line. There is a reason that Nigeria uses university professors as election monitors.
You're going to leave us with that cliffhanger, or?
Because they are trusted parties in data, the whole data ecosystem. Yes.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Nana. Yeah, please, the gentleman in the back, and then our friend from Cameroon. Thanks.
Well, my name is Usama. I'm from the United Nations Development Program, Digital Democracy Specialist, and I have two questions. The first one is for you, Nana. You spoke about the field and the soccer field, but one of the things that happens usually also in football and also within the internet, what made me wonder is basically the idea of conflicting rules or conflict. Sometimes for the referee, it's hard for the referee to make a judge after with the VAR, and then they make the judge, and basically even the football players are, they don't accept it easily, and then they talk about it. So the idea, this happens a lot on social media, especially with conflicting news that happens all the time. So how do we respond to this specific issue? And the second one was, I'm not sure if Kathy is here or not. It's a simple question, but it's a deep question. It's about the idea of fact-checking. Does fact-checking really work? Especially knowing, just understanding and realizing together that sometimes, after the spread of misinformation, then we respond after a few hours, and then, the misinformation is shared and false news is shared much more, and is, getting into much more people than, the fact-checked news. So basically, does it really work? And the other part of the question is basically, how do we measure the impact of these kind of initiatives? Thank you.
Thanks so much. Nenda?
Our time is fast spent, but Osama, thank you so very much. As long as we're in a human-led situation and environment, we are not perfect. And that's why the continued engagement in a responsible way in rules making and rules keeping is very important. When I was young, I used to play football, and we used to have this rule that says 3 corners equal 1 goal. That was long ago. If you played 3 corners, it was counted as a goal. But we've done away with that. So there may be conflicting situations, and FIFA, which is the federation of all federations, will come together and say, this is no longer working. Can we improve it? And that's one of the ways we build trust. Keep speaking to Ola, keep speaking to Chris, keep speaking to Sasha. And if we're not happy as a global data community with a certain regulation, we should be able to say, we have something better. What can you suggest? So my thing is, trust also means making room for failure, making room for imperfect conditions, but engaging to make it better. Fact-checking does work, because sometimes we count the loss, but it might be better to also look at what we don't lose when we have good information. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nenda. Yes, absolutely. Trust is a relationship, as we all know, and it's an investment, and you have to work at it. And that's why I think the conversations that we're having here are so critical. So we'll do one quick last question, if I may, from our colleague from Cameroon, just here. Thank you. And then I think we really are out of time. So one quick question with a quick answer, I hope, and then we'll go.
Question I could answer, maybe not, but I don't know if it will be a question, but maybe some answer to Nena, who asked if there's a particular concern for Africa. Yes, I do. I think so, because in my old days, when I was school, we have been taught that there's a difference between data and information. Information was said when data are processed. And that's why I will do some advocacy for the government, data governance and literacy. The question now is, for what? For who? Because in the case of Africa, the fact is that there was and there is few producers of data, but more and more producers of information. And those are running after the buzz, what they are calling the buzz. So everyone now can pick up data and produce an information and throw it in the social media. And as the first speaker said, this fake or misinformation will run faster than the data. And that's why we need to update our skills according to the data, information, and data literacy and data governance.
Wonderful. Well, in many ways, I think that's a very nice bookend to this conversation that we've had today. So thank you very much to the DG from Cameroon. So wonderful intervention. Huge thanks to the panelists and to all the audience members who came. I know we have enough to talk about probably for another 5 hours, but just to point out that there is going to be a high-level plenary on trust and ethics in data. So if you want to get a little bit more deeply into this topic, please join that plenary as well. So huge thanks to my panelists, huge thanks to the presenters who presented online, and of course to all of you, and have a good rest of the day. Thanks.